In the vast expanse of space where stars twinkled like distant lanterns and planets drifted silently in their orbits, humanity had carved out a fragile foothold among the cosmos. For centuries, Earth's people had dreamed of reaching beyond their home planet, and now that dream was a reality. Colonies dotted the galaxy, ships traveled between systems, and humanity stood shoulder to shoulder with alien civilizations far older and more advanced than themselves. But despite their achievements, humans were often dismissed by others as weak, primitive, and overly emotional. They were seen as little more than children trying to play grown-up games in a universe they did not fully understand. On a massive, space station orbiting Proxima Centauri, the closest star system to Earth, diplomats from dozens of species gathered for yet another round of tense negotiations. The station itself was an engineering marvel, built by the Zarnith Collective, a coalition of technologically superior races who viewed humanity with thinly veiled contempt. The walls gleamed with polished metal, and the corridors hummed with the quiet efficiency of machines designed to serve beings far smarter than humans could ever hope to be. It was here that Ethan Hayes, a tall, wiry man with sharp features and piercing blue eyes, found himself standing before a group of ambassadors. His suit was immaculate, his tie perfectly knotted, but none of it mattered. To the aliens seated around the table, he was just another representative of a species they considered laughable. Ethan cleared his throat, trying to maintain his composure as Kalis, the leader of the Zarnith delegation, leaned forward with a smirk on his face. Kalis was a towering figure, his skin shimmering like liquid silver under the artificial lights. His voice carried a tone of amusement when he spoke, each word dripping with condescension. "Tell us again, Ambassador Hayes," Kalis said, his lips curling into what might have been a smile if it weren't so cold. "Why should we take your myths seriously? Stories about heroes slaying monsters or gods creating worlds? These are childish fantasies. Surely you don't expect us to believe such nonsense holds any value." The room fell silent. Other ambassadors exchanged glances, some chuckling softly at Kalis's remark. Ethan felt heat rising in his cheeks, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had spent years preparing for moments like this, learning how to navigate the delicate web of interstellar politics. Still, there was something particularly grating about the way Kalis dismissed human culture so casually. It wasn't just mockery, it was disdain, the kind that came from believing oneself inherently superior to everyone else. "Stories," Ethan began slowly, choosing his words carefully, "are more than entertainment. They teach lessons, preserve history, and inspire action. Even your own civilizations must have tales passed down through generations." Kalis waved a hand dismissively. "Of course we do, but ours are based on facts, logic, and reason. Your myths, however, are filled with contradictions and impossibilities. Heroes defeating armies single-handedly? Gods walking among mortals? These are the imaginings of a species still clinging to superstition." Ethan clenched his fists beneath the table, resisting the urge to argue further. He knew better than to let Kalis bait him into losing his temper. Instead, he took a deep breath and continued speaking. "Perhaps our stories seem simple to you because they focus on qualities like courage, sacrifice, and resilience. Qualities that cannot always be measured or quantified. Yet they define us. Without them, we wouldn't have made it this far." Kalis tilted his head slightly, studying Ethan with an expression that bordered on curiosity. "And yet here you stand, begging for scraps of respect while we control nearly every resource in this quadrant. Courage and sacrifice won't save you if we decide to take what remains of your colonies. What good are your qualities then?" Before Ethan could respond, the doors to the conference room slid open and a young aide rushed in, whispering urgently into Kalis's ear. Whatever the message was, it caused the Zarnith leader's smirk to widen into a full-blown grin. He straightened up in his chair, addressing the room once more. "It appears we no longer need to waste time debating the merits of human mythology. My advisors inform me that one of your outer colonies has fallen behind on its tribute payments. Consider this a reminder of your place, Ambassador Hayes. Humanity exists at our pleasure, not the other way around." With that, Kalis rose from his seat and strode out of the room, followed by his entourage. The remaining ambassadors quickly dispersed, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. He stared at the empty chair where Kalis had sat, feeling a mix of anger and helplessness wash over him. No matter how hard he tried, it seemed impossible to bridge the gap between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. Every attempt to assert their worth was met with ridicule or outright hostility. And now, with the threat of economic sanctions looming over yet another colony, the stakes were higher than ever. Back on Earth, nestled in a quiet coastal town, far removed from the political dramas of space stations and alien councils, Caleb Monroe lived a life of solitude. Once a celebrated war hero, he had retired from active duty after decades of service defending humanity's fledgling colonies. Now in his late 50s, Caleb's hair was streaked with gray and lines etched, his weathered face telling the story of battles fought and hardships endured. Despite his retirement, he remained a figure of admiration among younger generations, especially those training to join the military. Every morning, Caleb would sit on the porch of his modest home, sipping coffee while reading ancient texts. Books lined the shelves inside his house, their spines worn from years of use. From Greek epics to Norse legends, Caleb immersed himself in the stories of old, finding solace in the timeless themes of heroism and perseverance. Occasionally, he would invite cadets from the nearby academy to visit, sharing insights from his experiences and encouraging them to draw inspiration from these tales. One such visitor was Emily Dawson, a bright-eyed young woman with a passion for flying. At 22, she was eager to prove herself, though her instructors often criticized her for being too impulsive. Today, she arrived at Caleb's doorstep carrying a small gift, a jar of homemade jam made by her mother. She smiled nervously as he ushered her inside, taking a seat at the kitchen table. "Thanks for seeing me, sir," Emily said, twisting the cap off the jar. "I know you're busy." Caleb chuckled, setting 2 cups of tea on the table. "Not too busy for you, kid. You've got potential, even if your superiors can't see it yet. So what's on your mind?" Emily hesitated, unsure how to phrase her question. Finally, she blurted out, "Do you think we'll ever earn their respect? The aliens, I mean. Sometimes it feels like no matter what we do, they'll always look down on us." Caleb leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. After a moment, he replied, "Respect isn't given freely. It's earned. But earning it means showing them something they haven't seen before, something unexpected." "But how?" Emily pressed. "They're stronger, faster, smarter." "Smarter doesn't always mean wiser," Caleb interrupted gently. "There's power in our stories, Emily. In the way we fight, the way we endure. That's something they'll never understand unless we show them." Though Emily nodded, she couldn't shake the feeling that Caleb's words sounded more like wishful thinking than practical advice. Still, there was something comforting about hearing them from someone who had seen so much. As she left his house later that afternoon, she resolved to hold on to his words, hoping they might guide her someday when the odds seemed insurmountable. Little did either of them know, the opportunity to put those words into action would come, sooner than expected, and the fate of humanity might depend on it. The news hit like a thunderclap, shaking the fragile peace that humanity had tried so hard to maintain. The Zarnath Collective, true to Kalis's veiled threats, launched a devastating surprise attack on one of Earth's most vital colonies, a resource-rich planet named Eos Prime. The assault came without warning, catching colonial defenses completely off guard. Dozens of sleek angular warships descended from the heavens, their weapons blazing with an intensity that overwhelmed human forces in minutes. By the time the smoke cleared, Eos Prime was a wasteland, its cities reduced to smoldering ruins and its people either dead or scattered. The fallout spread quickly across the galaxy. Images of the destruction flooded communication channels, sparking outrage and panic among human populations. Refugees poured into neighboring systems, straining already limited resources. For many, it was a grim reminder of humanity's vulnerability. Despite decades of progress, they were still outmatched by species who viewed them as little more than pests to be exterminated. Leaders scrambled to respond, but the sheer scale of the disaster left them paralyzed. The United Earth Council convened emergency sessions, debating how best to retaliate, or whether retaliation was even possible. Ethan Hayes watched the chaos unfold from his office aboard the Proxima Centauri station, his heart heavy with dread. He had seen this coming, hadn't he? Kalus's arrogance, his disdain for humanity, it all pointed to this moment. Yet knowing it was inevitable didn't make it any easier to bear. As reports of further attacks trickled in, raids on mining stations, blockades of trade routes, Ethan felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Humanity needed leadership now more than ever, but what could he do? Diplomacy had failed spectacularly. Words alone wouldn't stop the Zarnith juggernaut. It was during one of these late-night strategy sessions that Ethan received an urgent message from Earth. The transmission crackled to life on his console, revealing the face of General Patricia Monroe, a stern woman with sharp features and piercing gray eyes. She wasted no time with pleasantries. "Ambassador Hayes," she began, her voice clipped and direct. "We're mobilizing every available asset to counter the Zarnith offensive. But we need someone who understands both sides of this conflict. Someone who can inspire unity when morale is at its lowest." Ethan frowned, unsure where this was heading. "I appreciate the sentiment, General, but I'm not exactly known for my battlefield prowess." Patricia shook her head. "This isn't about leading armies. It's about rallying people. There's only one person alive who embodies everything humanity stands for: courage, resilience, ingenuity. And right now we need him more than ever." Realization dawned on Ethan and he sighed deeply. "You mean Caleb Monroe?" "Exactly." Patricia leaned closer to the screen, her expression softening slightly. "Caleb may have retired, but his legend hasn't faded. If anyone can turn the tide, it's him. That's why we're asking you to reach out personally. Convince him to come back not as a soldier but as a symbol." Ethan hesitated, weighing the implications. Caleb was notoriously reclusive, preferring the quiet solitude of his coastal home to the chaos of interstellar politics. Convincing him to step back into the fray would be no small feat. Still, if there was even a chance. "I'll try," Ethan said finally, "but I can't promise anything." Meanwhile, thousands of light years away, Caleb Monroe sat on his porch, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. The morning sun cast golden rays over the ocean, painting the waves with shimmering use of orange and pink. He sipped his coffee slowly, savoring the tranquility. Days like this reminded him why he had chosen retirement: to escape the endless cycle of violence and loss that defined military life. Here, surrounded by nature and books, he found a semblance of peace. But peace, as Caleb knew all too well, was fleeting. A sudden knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Setting his mug aside, he rose and opened it to find Emily Dawson standing there, her face pale and drawn. Behind her stood two uniformed officers, their expressions grim. Caleb's stomach tightened as he took in the scene. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. "Caleb," Emily stammered, her voice trembling, "you need to see this." Without another word, she handed him a datapad displaying live footage of the attack on Eos Prime. Flames engulfed buildings, screams echoed through the streets, and bodies lay strewn across the ground. Caleb stared at the images, his jaw tightening as anger and grief welled up inside him. He recognized the colony instantly. It was one of the first settlements he had helped defend years ago. A place he had once called home. "How long ago did this happen?" Caleb asked, his voice low and controlled. "Less than 12 hours, one of the officers replied. "The Zarnith are hitting other targets too. We've lost contact with several outposts and refugee ships are flooding our borders. Sir, we need your help." Caleb turned away, gripping the edge of the doorway as memories flooded back. He had seen destruction like this before, in wars fought and won, in battles where victory came at a terrible cost. Each scar on his soul bore witness to the horrors of conflict, and he had sworn never to return to that life. Yet here he was, faced with the same choice once more. "Why me?" he muttered under his breath, though it wasn't really a question. Deep down, he already knew the answer. Emily stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. Because you're the only one who can show us how to fight back. Not just with guns, but with heart. With purpose. Caleb looked at her, seeing the desperation in her eyes. She believed in him, believed in the stories he had shared, the lessons he had taught. Could he really turn his back on that? On her? Before he could respond, the sound of an incoming transmission filled the air. The officers exchanged glances before activating the comms device. Ethan Hayes' face appeared on the screen, looking haggard and weary. "Caleb," he said, skipping formalities. "I know you don't want to hear this, but we're out of options. The Zarnath are tearing us apart, and unless someone steps up, humanity might not survive this." Caleb let out a bitter laugh. "And you think I'm the guy to save the day? I'm retired, Ethan. Broken bones, bad knees, and a head full of ghosts. What makes you think I can change anything? It's not about being perfect," Ethan countered. "It's about being willing to try. You've inspired countless soldiers, cadets, and civilians. Your name carries weight, Caleb. People will follow you because they trust you." For a long moment, Caleb said nothing. He glanced at Emily, then at the officers, and finally at the horizon stretching beyond his porch. The ocean sparkled innocently, untouched by the horrors unfolding elsewhere. But innocence couldn't shield them forever. Sooner or later, the war would reach Earth itself, and when it did, humanity would need every ounce of strength it could muster. "All right," Caleb said at last, his voice firm despite the turmoil within. "But I'm doing this my way. No committees, no red tape. Just me and whoever's brave enough to tag along." Ethan nodded, relief washing over his face. "Whatever you need, it's yours." As the transmission ended, Caleb turned to his unexpected visitors. "Looks like retirement's over," he said wryly. "Pack your bags, kid, you're coming with me." Emily beamed, her earlier fear replaced by determination. "Where are we going?" "To gather some friends," Caleb replied, grabbing his coat. "And maybe remind the Zarnath why picking a fight with humanity was the worst mistake they ever made." Over the next few days, Caleb moved quickly, assembling a team unlike any other. First, he reached out to Marcus Lane, a brilliant but disgraced engineer whose unconventional methods had earned him a reputation as both a genius and a loose cannon. Marcus lived in a cramped workshop on Mars, tinkering with machines that defied conventional logic. When Caleb arrived, Marcus greeted him with skepticism, but also curiosity. After hearing Caleb's plan, he agreed to join, intrigued by the challenge of taking on the Zarnath with brains rather than brawn. Next, they recruited Rachel Meyer, a linguist renowned for her ability to decipher alien languages. Rachel had spent years studying the cultures of various species, earning respect even among those who otherwise dismissed humans. Her knowledge of Zarnath communication protocols proved invaluable, giving the team a critical edge. Finally, there was Daniel Brooks, a former mercenary seeking redemption after a career marred by questionable choices. Daniel brought combat expertise and a ruthless pragmatism that balanced Caleb's idealistic vision. Though initially reluctant, he warmed to the idea of fighting for something greater than personal gain. Together, they formed Task Force Phoenix, a ragtag group united by a shared goal: to prove that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't its technology or firepower, but its indomitable spirit. As they prepared for their mission, Caleb gathered the team in a dimly lit briefing room aboard a repurposed cargo ship. Maps and schematics covered the walls, detailing potential targets and strategies. Caleb stood at the center, addressing his recruits with quiet authority. "Our enemy thinks we're weak," he began, his gaze sweeping across the room. "They think we're predictable, easy to crush. Let's show them they're wrong. We're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for pride, for honor, for the stories future generations will tell about us. Are you ready?" One by one, the team members nodded, their resolve hardening. They didn't know what lay ahead, but they trusted Caleb to lead them through it. The cargo ship carrying Task Force Phoenix hummed softly as it drifted through the vast emptiness of space. Inside, the mood was tense but focused. Caleb Monroe paced the narrow corridors, his mind racing with plans and possibilities. He knew their mission was a gamble. One wrong move and they could all end up dead. But if they succeeded, they might just buy humanity enough time to regroup and fight back against the Zarnath Collective. For now, though, Caleb's priority was unity. His team was skilled, yes, but they were also a patchwork of personalities, each carrying their own baggage. If they hoped to survive, let alone win, they needed to trust one another. In the ship's cramped common area, Marcus Lane sat hunched over a pile of spare parts, muttering under his breath as he worked. His fingers moved quickly, assembling what looked like a chaotic mess of wires and circuits. To anyone else it might have seemed like junk, but Marcus had a knack for turning scraps into miracles. Emily Dawson hovered nearby, watching him with a mixture of fascination and skepticism. "What exactly are you building?" she asked finally, unable to contain her curiosity. Marcus glanced up, his dark eyes gleaming with mischief. "Something that'll make the Zarnath regret ever messing with us," he replied cryptically. "You'll see." Emily frowned but didn't press further. She had learned early on that Marcus didn't take kindly to questions about his work. Instead, she turned her attention to Rachel Meyer, who sat cross-legged on the floor, poring over a tablet filled with alien text. Rachel's brow furrowed in concentration as she scribbled notes on a piece of paper beside her. "Any luck?" Emily ventured, leaning closer. Rachel looked up and smiled faintly. "Depends on what you mean by luck. The Zarnath language is tricky. It's less about words and more about context. But I think I've found a pattern in their military transmissions. If we can crack it, we might be able to predict their next move." "That'd be useful," Emily said, nodding. "But how does understanding their language help us fight them?" "It's not just about fighting," Rachel explained patiently. "It's about strategy. Knowing what they're saying and what they're not gives us an edge." "Information is power, Emily." Before Emily could respond, Daniel Brooks entered the room, his tall frame casting a shadow over everyone else. He carried a tray of food, which he set down on the table with a thud. "If you ask me," he said gruffly, "we should stop wasting time talking and start hitting them where it hurts." Marcus rolled his eyes. "And here I thought subtlety was your strong suit." Daniel shot him a glare. "Subtlety doesn't win wars. Action does." Caleb chose that moment to step into the room, his presence immediately silencing the brewing argument. He surveyed the group, his expression unreadable. "Enough," he said firmly. "We don't have time for bickering. We're stronger together, and we'll need every skill you bring to the table if we're going to pull this off." The team fell silent, their eyes fixed on Caleb. Though none of them would admit it aloud, they respected him, not just because of his reputation, but because he exuded a quiet confidence that inspired trust. When Caleb spoke, people listened. "Now," Caleb continued, pulling up a holographic map of the galaxy on the wall screen. "Here's the plan. Our first target is a Zarnath supply depot orbiting a moon near Eos Prime. It's heavily guarded, but if we can hit it hard and fast, we'll cripple their ability to resupply their fleet. More importantly, it'll send a message. They underestimated us and they'll pay for it." Emily raised her hand hesitantly. "Won't they expect us to retaliate? I mean, after what happened on Eos Prime." "They'll expect something," Caleb admitted. "But not this. Not from us. That's why we're going to use their arrogance against them. They think we're predictable, weak. We're going to show them otherwise." Marcus smirked, holding up the device he had been working on. "This baby will give us the element of surprise. Trust me, it'll get the job done." Caleb nodded approvingly. "Good. Now let's go over the details. Rachel, you'll handle communications. Keep an ear out for any chatter that might tip us off to reinforcements. Daniel, you're leading the ground assault. Stick to the plan and don't let your temper get the better of you. Emily, you're flying cover. If things go south, you're our way out. And Marcus..." He paused, eyeing the engineer skeptically. "Just try not to blow us all up, okay?" Marcus grinned. "No promises." As the days passed, the team grew closer, bonding over shared meals and late-night conversations. Caleb encouraged these moments, knowing that camaraderie was just as important as preparation. During one such conversation, Emily found herself sitting beside Caleb on the observation deck, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. "Do you really think we can do this?" she asked quietly, breaking the silence. "I mean, the Zarnith are so much stronger than us." Caleb took a sip from his coffee mug before answering. "Strength isn't everything," he said. "Humans have always been outnumbered, outgunned, outmatched. But we've survived because we adapt, because we refuse to give up no matter how bad things get." "But what if we fail?" Emily persisted. "What if we're not enough?" Caleb chuckled softly. "Failure isn't the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing is never trying at all. Look, Emily, I won't lie to you. This mission is dangerous. There's a good chance some of us won't come back. But if we succeed, even just a little, it'll be worth it. Humanity needs hope right now. And sometimes, hope comes from doing the impossible." Emily nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She still felt uncertain, but there was something reassuring about Caleb's calm determination. Maybe, just maybe, they stood a chance. Finally, the day of the raid arrived. The cargo ship dropped out of hyperspace near the designated coordinates, cloaked and undetected. Through the viewport, the Zarnith supply depot loomed large, a sprawling complex bristling with weapons turrets and patrolling drones. Caleb gathered the team one last time, running through the plan one final moment. "Remember," he said, his voice steady, "this isn't just about taking out a depot, it's about proving to ourselves and to them that we're not afraid. Stay sharp, stay focused, and most importantly, watch each other's backs. Let's make history." That the team split into action. Emily guided the ship into position while Rachel monitored the comms, listening for any signs of trouble. Meanwhile, Caleb, Marcus, and Daniel boarded a smaller shuttle, preparing to infiltrate the depot itself. As they approached, Marcus activated his device, a compact EMP generator designed to disable the depot's defenses temporarily. The shuttle shuddered slightly as the pulse surged outward, plunging the facility into darkness. "Now!" Caleb shouted, signaling the start of the assault. The trio moved swiftly, taking down guards with precision and stealth. Daniel led the charge, his combat training evident in every move. Behind him, Caleb provided cover fire, his aim steady despite the chaos around them. Marcus stayed close, ensuring the EMP held long enough for them to reach their objective. Inside the depot, crates of weapons, fuel, and supplies lined the walls. Caleb planted explosives strategically, setting timers to ensure maximum damage. Just as they finished, alarms blared throughout the facility, signaling the return of power. The Zarnith were onto them. "We need to move," Caleb yelled, motioning for the others to retreat. They sprinted toward the exit, dodging blasts from pursuing soldiers. Outside, Emily waited anxiously in the shuttle, engines idling. As soon as the team climbed aboard, she gunned the throttle, sending the craft rocketing away from the depot. Moments later, a massive explosion lit up the night sky, engulfing the facility in flames. Back aboard the cargo ship, the team erupted into cheers. They had done it. They had struck a blow against the Zarnith, proving that humanity wasn't as helpless as their enemies believed. Caleb allowed himself a small smile, though he knew this was only the beginning. The war was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, hope flickered to life. The success of the raid on the Zarnith supply depot rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave. News of Task Force Phoenix's daring operation spread quickly, carried by encrypted messages, intercepted broadcasts, and whispered rumors among human colonies. For the first time in weeks, humanity had something to celebrate. A victory, however small, against an enemy that had seemed invincible. Refugees huddled in overcrowded shelters cheered at the sight of footage showing the depot, engulfed in flames. Pilots stationed at distant outposts replayed recordings of Emily's nimble maneuvers, marveling at her skill. Even skeptical officers who had doubted Caleb Monroe's unorthodox methods began to reconsider their stance. But for Caleb and his team, there was no time to rest on their laurels. The raid had bought them a temporary advantage, but it also painted a target on their backs. The Zarnith Collective, humiliated by the loss of such a critical resource hub, would not let this insult go unanswered. Kalis himself was reportedly furious, vowing to hunt down the perpetrators and make an example of them. Every moment they spent celebrating was a moment wasted. They needed to stay ahead of the game, or risk losing everything they had gained. On board, the cargo ship, now christened Phoenix Rising by Marcus in a rare burst of sentimentality, the mood was somber, yet determined. The team gathered in the common area once again, reviewing data and planning their next move. Caleb stood at the front of the room, leaning against a table covered in maps and schematics. His face was calm, but his eyes betrayed the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "We hit them where it hurt," he began, addressing the group. "But they'll recover faster than we'd like. This isn't just about damaging their resources, it's about breaking their confidence. They think they're untouchable. We need to keep proving them wrong." Emily nodded, her earlier doubts replaced by a growing sense of purpose. "So what's next?" she asked, leaning forward in her seat. "Another depot? Or do we aim bigger?" Caleb glanced at Rachel, who had been analyzing intercepted Zarnith communications. "Rachel?" She adjusted her glasses before speaking, her voice steady and measured. "From what I've gathered, the Zarnith are scrambling to reinforce key locations. They're funneling troops and supplies toward a central command post orbiting Proxima Centauri. It's heavily fortified, but if we could strike there, it'd be suicide," Daniel interjected bluntly, crossing his arms over his chest. "Even with Marcus's gadgets, we wouldn't stand a chance." "Not necessarily," Caleb replied, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "We don't have to take the entire station, just enough to disrupt their operations. A well-placed strike could throw their chain of command into chaos." Marcus perked up, clearly intrigued. "And by well-placed, you mean something big and flashy, right? Something that screams human ingenuity?" Caleb smirked. "Exactly, but we'll need more than brute force. This has to be smart, precise. That's where our myths come in." "Our myths?" Emily echoed, tilting her head in confusion. Caleb turned to face her, his expression softening slightly. "Think about it. Humans have always loved stories about underdogs winning against impossible odds. David and Goliath. Odysseus outsmarting Polyphemus. These aren't just tales. They're blueprints for how to fight smarter, not harder. If we frame our actions as part of a larger narrative, we can inspire others to join us, and maybe even sow doubt in the minds of our enemies." Rachel frowned, tapping her pen against her notebook. "You're saying we use psychology as a weapon?" "In a way, yes," Caleb confirmed. "The Zarnith see themselves as superior, not just technologically but intellectually. They dismiss us because they think we're too emotional, too irrational. Let's give them a reason to question that belief." Over the next few days, Caleb worked tirelessly to weave together fragments of human mythology into a cohesive strategy. He shared stories with the team during meals and downtime, highlighting themes of resilience, cleverness, and unity. Each tale served a dual purpose. Not only did it remind the team of humanity's strengths, but it also helped shape their approach to future missions. By the time they reached Proxima Centauri, everyone aboard Phoenix Rising felt connected to something greater than themselves. The central command post loomed ahead of them, a massive structure bristling with weapons turrets and shield generators. To call it intimidating would be an understatement. Even Emily, normally fearless in the cockpit, hesitated as she guided the ship closer under cloak. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered, glancing back at Caleb. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Trust me, this is going to work." Their plan was audacious, bordering on reckless. Using Marcus's modified EMP device, they intended to disable the command post's outer defenses long enough to deploy a series of drones rigged with explosives. Once inside, Caleb and Daniel would lead a ground assault aimed at sabotaging the station's core systems. Meanwhile, Rachel would monitor communications, feeding real-time updates to Emily, who would remain on standby to extract the team if things went sideways. As the EMP surged outward, plunging the command post into darkness, the team sprang into action. Caleb and Daniel moved swiftly through the corridors, taking down guards with calculated precision. Behind them, Marcus ensured the EMP held steady, muttering curses under his breath as sweat dripped from his brow. "Hurry up," he hissed into his comlink. "I can't keep this thing running forever." Back on the bridge, Rachel relayed crucial information to Emily. "They're deploying reinforcements from Sector B. You'll need to create a diversion if they're going to make it out alive." Emily didn't hesitate. She launched a decoy drone toward the incoming ships, drawing their fire while simultaneously broadcasting a pre-recorded message across all frequencies. In a tone dripping with mock arrogance, the recording taunted the Zarnith, referencing ancient human legends of heroes triumphing over tyrants. "Your arrogance blinds you," the voice declared. "Humanity has faced giants before, and won." The effect was immediate. Confusion rippled through the ranks of the Zarnith forces as they struggled to process the transmission. Some dismissed it as meaningless propaganda, while others wondered aloud whether humans truly believed these absurd stories, or worse, whether there might be truth to them. Doubt, however fleeting, began to take root. Inside the command post, Caleb and Daniel reached their objective, the main control room. With seconds to spare, they planted charges around the core systems, setting timers to ensure maximum disruption. As alarms blared throughout the facility, signaling the return of power, Caleb grabbed Daniel's arm. "Time to go." They raced, back toward the extraction point, narrowly avoiding patrols and dodging blasts from automated turrets. Outside, Emily waited anxiously, her hands gripping the controls of the shuttle. When Caleb and Daniel finally emerged, battered but alive, she wasted no time accelerating away from the station. Moments later, a brilliant explosion illuminated the darkness, sending shockwaves rippling outward. Back aboard, Phoenix rising. The team erupted into cheers once again. They had done it. They had struck another blow against the Zarnith, this time targeting their command structure. But more importantly, they had planted seeds of doubt in the minds of their enemies. The psychological impact of their actions was undeniable, as evidenced by intercepted transmissions revealing growing unease within the Zarnith ranks. Caleb allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction, though he knew better than to let his guard down. Turning to Rachel, he asked, "What are they saying now?" She scrolled through the latest reports, her lips curling into a faint smile. "Some are questioning whether humanity might possess some hidden advantage. Others are calling for increased caution. Either way, they're shaken." "That's exactly what we wanted," Caleb said, nodding. "Doubt is a powerful weapon. Keep feeding it." As the ship drifted further into deep space, Caleb gathered the team one last time. "This is just the beginning," he told them, his voice firm but filled with quiet pride. "Every victory brings us closer to proving that humanity's greatest. Strength lies not in its technology but in its spirit. Together we'll write a story worth telling." And for the first time since the war began, hope burned brighter than ever. The victories achieved by Task Force Phoenix had ignited a spark of hope across human territories, but they also came at a cost. The Zarnith Collective, humiliated by the repeated strikes against their forces, began to shift their strategy. No longer content to simply raid and conquer, they now sought to crush humanity's spirit entirely. Their next move was as bold as it was brutal, an all-out assault on Earth itself. News of the impending invasion reached Caleb Monroe and his team while they were en route to rendezvous with a fleet of human ships near Jupiter. The transmission crackled to life on the ship's console, revealing General Patricia Monroe's face once again. Her expression was grim, her voice tinged with urgency. "Caleb," she began without preamble, "the Zarnith are coming for Earth. They've mobilized a massive armada and they're moving faster than we anticipated. If we don't stop them, humanity could lose everything." Caleb's jaw tightened as he absorbed the gravity of the situation. Earth wasn't just another colony. It was the heart of humanity, the cradle of its culture, history, and identity. Losing it would mean more than defeat. It would mean extinction. He glanced at his team who had gathered around the screen, their faces reflecting a mix of fear and determination. "What's the plan?" Caleb asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil brewing inside him. Patricia hesitated before answering. "We're assembling every available ship, every soldier, and every resource we have left. But the odds are against us. The Zarnith outnumber us 10-1, and their technology is far superior. We need you to lead the charge, not just militarily, but symbolically. Humanity needs a hero now more than ever." Caleb exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. He had never wanted this role. He had always preferred leading from the shadows, letting others take the spotlight. But there was no denying the truth in Patricia's words. If humanity stood any chance of surviving, someone had to step up and rally the scattered remnants of its people. "All right," Caleb said finally, his tone firm. "Tell me where to be, and when." By the time Phoenix Rising docked with the human fleet, preparations for Earth's defense were already underway. Ships of all shapes and sizes crowded the space around Jupiter, forming a makeshift armada that looked more like a desperate gamble than a coordinated military force. Pilots scrambled to repair damaged vessels, engineers worked tirelessly to upgrade outdated weapon systems, and volunteers, many of whom had never seen combat, trained feverishly for the battle ahead. Caleb stepped onto the bridge of the flagship, a battered cruiser named Resolute, where Admiral Hayes waited alongside other senior officers. Ethan Hayes, still serving as humanity's chief diplomat, stood beside his brother, his usual composure replaced by an uncharacteristic tension. When Caleb entered, the room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. "Thank you for coming, Admiral," Hayes said, extending a hand. "We've outlined a defensive strategy, but frankly, we're outmatched. Any ideas?" Caleb studied the holographic map hovering above the table, which displayed the projected trajectory of the Zarnith fleet. Their numbers were staggering, a sea of red dots converging on a single blue dot representing Earth. It was clear that conventional tactics wouldn't work here. If humanity hoped to survive, they would need to rely on something far less tangible, but infinitely more powerful: belief. "We can't win this fight head-on," Caleb admitted, pointing to the map, "but we can make them regret starting it. Let's use their arrogance against them. They think we're weak, predictable. Let's give them a reason to doubt that." He turned to Rachel, who had joined the briefing. "You've been studying their language and behavior. What do they value most?" Rachel thought for a moment before replying. "Order, precision. They see themselves as apex predators, untouchable because of their efficiency. Anything chaotic or unpredictable unsettles them." Caleb nodded, a plan beginning to form in his mind. "Then let's embrace chaos. Divide and conquer. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and keep them guessing. Make them question whether they underestimated us, or if we've got something they can't understand." Admiral Hayes raised an eyebrow. "And how do you propose we do that?" Caleb smiled faintly. "With stories." Over the next few days, Caleb worked closely with the fleet's commanders to implement his strategy. Drawing inspiration from ancient myths, he crafted a narrative designed to inspire both humans and unsettle the Zarnith. Each phase of the battle would correspond to a chapter in an epic tale, one of heroes rising from ashes, gods clashing in the heavens, and mortals defying destiny. Every ship, every pilot, every soldier would play a role in this grand story, knowing that their actions weren't just about survival, they were about proving humanity's worth. To amplify the psychological impact, Caleb enlisted Marcus to create a series of decoys and traps based on legendary battles. Using salvaged materials, Marcus built drones equipped with holographic projectors capable of simulating entire fleets. These illusions would confuse the Zarnith, forcing them to waste resources pursuing phantom targets. Meanwhile, Daniel led strike teams tasked with infiltrating enemy lines, striking key points and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. Emily played a crucial role as well, coordinating aerial maneuvers that mirrored famous dogfights from human history. Her squadron adopted call signs inspired by mythological figures, Achilles, Athena, Thor, broadcasting taunts over open channels to further unnerve the Zarnith. "Your pride will be your downfall," she declared during one such exchange, her voice laced with defiance. Humanity doesn't kneel. As the Zarnith fleet approached Earth, the stage was set for what would become known as the Battle of Ragnarok, a final, apocalyptic clash between two vastly different civilizations. The human fleet positioned itself in orbit, forming layers of defense designed to whittle down the enemy's numbers. Behind them lay Earth, its continents bathed in sunlight, oblivious to the storm gathering in the void above. When the first wave of Zarnith ships emerged from hyperspace, the battle erupted into chaos. Lasers streaked across the darkness, missiles detonated in brilliant flashes, and debris spiraled through the wreckage of destroyed vessels. Emily led her squadron into the fray, weaving between enemy fire with breathtaking agility. Her call sign, Athena, echoed through the comms as she directed her pilots to target specific weaknesses in the Zarnith formation. Meanwhile, Marcus's decoys proved devastatingly effective. Entire squadrons of Zarnith fighters broke off to pursue phantom fleets, leaving gaps in their defenses that human ships exploited ruthlessly. Rachel monitored communications, feeding real-time updates to the fleet and translating cryptic messages from the Zarnith command. "They're panicking," she reported to Caleb, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Some of their captains are questioning orders, citing inconsistencies in our tactics." Caleb grinned, though his expression quickly sobered as reports of casualties began pouring in. The human fleet was holding its own, but the cost was high. Ships exploded in fiery bursts, sending shockwaves rippling through the ranks. Pilots screamed as their crafts were torn apart, their voices cutting short mid-transmission. Yet even in the face of overwhelming odds, the resolve of those who remained never wavered. On the ground, Earth's population watched the battle unfold via live feeds broadcast across the planet. Cities emptied as millions gathered in public squares praying for a miracle. Children clutched stuffed animals shaped like mythical creatures, while elders recounted tales of heroes past, drawing strength from the shared heritage of humanity. The height of the conflict, Caleb found himself aboard a small shuttle, leading a daring mission deep into the heart of the Zarnith flagship. Accompanied by Daniel and a handful of volunteers, he navigated treacherous corridors, taking down guards and disabling automated defenses. Their objective was simple yet perilous: destroy the ship's central AI core, crippling the Zarnith command structure. As they neared their goal, Caleb paused, turning to address his companions. "This is it," he said, his voice low but filled with conviction. "Whatever happens next, remember why we're here. Not for glory, not for revenge, but for everyone counting on us back home." Daniel nodded, gripping his weapon tightly. "Let's finish this." With a final surge of determination, they breached the core chamber, planting charges around the massive machine. Alarms blared throughout the ship, signaling the intrusion. Caleb activated the timer, then motioned for his team to retreat. As they sprinted back toward the extraction point, explosions rocked the flagship, sending it careening out of control. Back aboard Resolute, the human fleet regrouped, watching as the crippled Zarnith flagship drifted helplessly in space. Cheers erupted across the fleet, though they were tempered by the knowledge that the battle was far from over. The remaining Zarnith ships continued their assault, undeterred by the loss of their leader. Caleb stood on the bridge, gazing at the carnage unfolding before him. Though battered and bloodied, humanity had proven itself resilient. For the first time in the war, the Zarnith no longer seemed invincible. Doubt had taken root in their ranks, sown by the very myths they had dismissed as childish nonsense. "We're not done yet," Caleb murmured, his voice barely audible over the din of battle. "Not by a long shot."